Danielle Coke Balfour, designer turned illustrator, advocate, and entrepreneur. Danielle Coke is the founder of Oh Happy Danny, a lifestyle brand and educational platform that uses artwork and resources to encourage hope, inspire justice, and make complex ideas more accessible. She helps everyday advocates do good daily in their spheres of influence using their passions and skills, which she shares with her community of over 500,000 followers. Danielle has a passion for helping brands deliver messaging with light and truth, and has partnered with Fortune 500 companies like Adobe and Meta. With a joy that flows from her desire to love her neighbor as herself, Danielle hopes to spark action in pursuit of the ultimate good as you hold her art in your home and carry it in your heart. Introducing our keynote speaker, Danielle Coke.
I need a copy of that to my email. That was, wow, thank you. I'm so happy to be, are y'all having a good time? I am really, really enjoying myself today. This was a much needed day, a much needed weekend it's going to be, and I'm just so happy to be here. But anyway, before I get started, because I'm gonna talk a little bit about myself throughout the presentation tonight. I'm a major Disney fan. Is anybody a Disney fan in the room? That wasn't enough hands. I feel a little weird. Okay, there we go. Perfect. So my talk, oh, there we go. Oopsies. While the slide gets up there, my talk is entitled Hopeful Reimagination. And as I was prepping for Joy and Justice, I was thinking, what would I want to hear if I was sitting in the room? As a young person who is literally in the trenches of social media. Anybody be posting on social media and just wondering what's going on? What is happening in the world? I'm someone who's in the trenches on social media, and I'm really passionate about justice, and I'm tired, and I'm worn out, and I'm exhausted, and I feel hopeless often. And so I wonder to myself, like, what would I want to hear as someone who is struggling with hopelessness? And I'm very, very excited to dive a little bit deeper into this topic of hopeful reimagination. But I wanted to play a little game. I have some prizes. This game will be real quick. I know we're not trying to be here all night. But I have been thinking recently about live action movies. That's why I mentioned Disney. And there are a few live action movies that have come out recently, and I have been pretty unimpressed. I don't know about anybody else. I mean, you know that I'm a Disney fan, but I'm also somebody who just loves a good story and loves to be drawn in and loves to be just enraptured with what I'm looking at. And so there's a couple movies that have come out as live action in recent years. And I kind of want to gauge y'all's thoughts on this. I have it up there when it's ready so you can see it. But there's four live action movies that have come out recently. There is The Jungle Book. That was like 2016. Is that recent? I don't think so. Has anyone seen The Jungle Book live action movie? Yes, you have. Oh, okay, good. What happened? Oh, y'all are pointing at the movie. Okay. Next is Mulan. Anyone seen Mulan? Okay, it's only on Disney. It's straight to digital. I don't know how you feel about that. Next is The Little Mermaid. Okay. And then finally we have The Lion King. Did anybody see The Lion King live action? Okay, so I looked up these ratings on a scale of 1 to 4, and I wanted to see what the people of the world thought about these movies. I wanted to see which was the best out of the 4 and which was the worst. And so out of the 4 I just named, Jungle Book, Mulan, The Little Mermaid, The Lion King, I want somebody to guess which one was the worst. Mulan? Jungle Book? Who said Lion King? You're correct. With a 52% on Rotten Tomatoes. They said that it lacked heart, imagination. It was like watching the National Geographic Channel. Did you feel that way? Okay, I have a little tote bag for you. I just opened my store. This says Black History. And since you got it right, oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, you got it. Yes, The Lion King got last. Next we have, between The Jungle Book, Mulan, and Little Mermaid, what's third place? The Little Mermaid. Yes, I know. 67%. And the votes are in. It's locked. We can't change that score. Yes, 67%. Do you know what they said? They said imitation with only a couple adjustments. Said it looked like the makers of the film didn't want to upset anybody. They already made him a little mad because she was black. So they're like, okay, everything else by the book. All right, so between Jungle Book and The Little Mermaid, I have a size medium t-shirt here. Which one was the second place of the two? Jungle Book, wait, I'm sorry, Mulan, sorry. Jungle Book, Mulan, which one was second place? Mulan. You got it. There you go, girl. I don't have any more prizes. Thank you for playing. Yes, Mulan. Second place. They said, where's the singing? Where's Mushu, the little dragon? They were like, we're missing some things. But overall, it was a great story and it felt refreshing in a way. And first place, 94%. Jungle Book. Can you imagine? It's the wildest thing. But I said all that to say this. While we love remakes of movies because of the nostalgia and the feeling that we get, and it's familiar, and we'll feel like we're young again, the consensus across the board is that remakes are falling flat for us. We'll go see it, but we don't feel satisfied because it's not doing anything new. They are glued to what my husband Cody calls the source material. I learned that from Cody, the source material, where it came from. They're glued to the source material so much so that they do nothing differently, for the most part. We know about remakes, but one thing that I think that I was craving as these remakes were coming out was a reimagination, you know? Give me something that's a bit familiar, but do something new for me. Do something different, refresh, transform. I want to feel something. And then Across the Spider-Verse came out. Has anybody seen Across the Spider-Verse? I have never in my life. It is the best animated movie I have ever seen in my life. I am a Disney fan. Take that in. Across the Spider-Verse, faithful to its source material, yet so unbelievably transformative and refreshing and imaginative. They said it challenged the very meaning of animation itself. It pushed the boundaries of innovation so far, but it was also deeply relatable and meaningful. And it took the story that it was given and it did a new thing. And the reason I mention this is because I believe that seekers of justice occupy this same space of transformative dreaming and reimagination. I don't know if a lot of us think of the work that way. Raise your hand if you would consider yourself a creative person. Oh, okay. Way more than I anticipated. This is good news. I hope you're encouraged today about what I'm gonna say, because some people, when I've asked this question in the past, let me try to make it work because I wasn't expecting that response. When I've asked this question in the past, I've been like, how many of y'all seek justice? And they're like, yeah. How many of you feel like you're creative? They're like, So what I would say to that is that all hands should have stayed up, because change making in itself is creative in nature. I consider creativity in its most simplest terms to take something and make it into something else. God, the creator, we learn in Genesis 1:1, created something out of nothing, the heavens and the earth, right? He's the only one that's ever done that. The rest of us have created something out of something else, exactly, which I believe is creative. Like, think about unjust systems and inequities and problems, taking and creating something new to take its place. That's the ultimate example of creativity. And let me talk about my story real quick. I really hope that y'all can get these slides up because they're so cute and I work real hard on them. But that's okay. I'm an artist, y'all. That's why I'm. Anyway, let me talk a little bit about what I do. So the beautiful video kind of explained it already, but I am an illustrator and activist, like to call it artivist sometimes too. So I like to say that I take concepts related to justice, empathy, equity, and I make them more digestible and easier to understand for the everyday person. I don't dumb it down. I don't change what it is. And if it's hard, I say it. But I want it to be approachable for somebody who may not be day to day in the trenches like we are, like working in this space. I want them to still realize that they have the responsibility and the ability to engage in these conversations. And so this was all stemmed from, long story short, I was the one black people working in a mall. And there was a moment where I was a little bit fed up with the microaggressions. There was one too many. There were one too many jokes. People just weren't, it was insensitive. The room was insensitive. Does anybody have a story? Can they relate? Room was insensitive. So I sat down with my boss and I was like, hey, I think we should talk about this because I really feel as though we could benefit from a DEI training, a lecture. Like, we have organizations, Be the Bridges down the street. So like, there's things we can do. And so he looked at me and he was like, I am not passionate about DEI. I don't see why I would take company money or time and invest into something I'm not passionate about. So I said, all right, God bless you, and I quit. I left loud. I should have left louder, but so I quit and I decided to take my graphic design passion, because I was working for an event planning agency at the time doing graphic design. So I said, I'm gonna take this graphic design passion and I'm gonna partner up with organizations that are doing this justice work on the ground, like they're already in it. And I'm gonna come and say, you don't have time to worry about your social media. You're not trying to make it look pretty, you're doing the work. So I will come and I will make it look pretty. And so I was like, let me take what I do with graphic design, reimagine it, and apply it to these organizations that could really use my help. And that's how I decided to step into reimagination. And, well, that was just in time because we're all right. Oh, use this? Oh, okay. We already played the game. We did this. Well, this is just in time because I wanted to introduce my first illustration with y'all tonight. But I wanted to talk about the idea of change makers as reimaginative and creative, because again, I've had to convince people of this in the past, and I just really wasn't expecting all of y'all to just think that you're creative. It's really wonderful, but one thing that change makers are known for is the ability to identify broken systems. That in and of itself is creative, not because you're immediately wanting to jump in and change everything, but we do. But I mean, the ability to recognize it first means that your imagination's already at work. You're feeling the effect of something being wrong, and it's triggering something in your mind to tell you, first off, this is wrong. And then next you have the courage to tear them down. I'm using blocks because, you know, we think of Legos and stuff as play toys and things, but in this reimaginative space, we're also thinking of them as, yes, these are the blocks that build up these unjust systems. These are the blocks that are causing injustice in our cities, and we're looking at them and we're like, yes, I'm a change maker and I have the ability to tear it down, but then I also have the imagination to dream of a new way forward. Dr. Christina Edmondson, she's in the room. She has been a mentor of mine for the past several months and has really been a blessing to me. But she said, anybody can knock something down, but it takes a creative and someone who's really passionate about the change to build it back again. And that was really encouraging to me. But finally, the strength to try to build a better future. Those all four are characteristics of what I call change makers. But also beyond that, as believers, we get to take it a step further. We have a hope. And I think it's really easy to forget that we have a hope because stuff could just get so hard and so difficult and so overwhelming and so exhausting. But we have a hope that allows us to take change making and be like, no, we're not just going to be satisfied with knocking it down. We're not just going to be satisfied of trying to think of a way forward and hope that one day it'll come to pass, but we're going to get on the ground and we're going to reimagine what we see in front of us. And so that is what I like to call hopeful reimagination. I defined it as hopeful reimagination involves using memory to help us dream up alternative solutions to current realities and pursuit of collective flourishing. So that's a lot. That's why I put it on there. But hopeful reimagination involves using memory to help us dream up alternative solutions to current realities in pursuit of collective flourishing. So in this definition, I want you to notice 3 different phases of life that I've wrapped up all in one definition. Memory, that's the past. Dreaming up alternative solutions to current realities, that's present and future. And then collective flourishing, of course, we want that in the present, and we're also working towards that in the future. So hopeful reimagination engages all of these things and allows it to work together for us to actually do good, but also to remind other people that there's more to this change-making work than just knocking things down. But it's also about the hope and the reimagination of building it up. And so basically, I want to talk about, we just talked about what hopeful reimagination is. I want to talk about what it's not also, where it comes from, and how we can live it out in our day-to-day, because that's the piece that I'm always waiting for. Like, what can I do about this now? So what it's not, where it comes from, and how to live it out. Okay, so I've talked about reimagination and who counts. Yes. Oh, okay, sorry, thank you. I was causing all the noises, I think. Okay, so do you know who's not reimaginative? We have us as the people who are really building and working towards justice, but you know who's not reimaginative? Opponents to justice. Our adversaries. How do I know this? Because they're satisfied with remakes. They don't want a new thing. That's the point. That's the exact thing they're fighting against. They like it as it was. Don't you hear them always saying they're trying to get it back to the good old days? They're always wanting to move us in the opposite direction. This is played out in history. I'm not Dr. Jamar Tisby, but I got a little history. Reconstruction. The period after the Civil War when newly freed Black Americans started taking steps towards equal standing in society through citizenship and political participation. So it's after 65, Juneteenth has come and gone. Black people were reimagining their present circumstance to create a future of collective flourishing for themselves. And then opponents to Reconstruction were like, no. We're gonna do what we call the redemption. We're gonna go back in some ways to the way it used to be. And we're gonna bring back the good old days as much as we can. So unfortunately, they couldn't re-enslave us. I know that was a really big disappointment. But they also decided, how about some white supremacist domestic terrorism? How about we start lynching and murdering and killing? How about Jim Crow? And they had the nerve to call it a redemption. Why would you use that word? It really perverted it to me because there's what they thought they were doing, but there's what they were actually doing. False redemption. I wrote about this in my upcoming book. It's called A Heart on Fire. It comes out in October. But I talked about the difference between this true redemption and this false redemption. First and foremost, true redemption seeks to restore wholeness. False redemption seeks to restore dysfunction. I'm giving these examples because in your day-to-day walk and fight for justice, there's going to be people who are acting like they're doing the work that you're doing. But what they're actually doing is the exact opposite of what you're doing, not in necessarily practice, but in end game. So, true redemption seeks to restore wholeness. Thank you. We are really rolling with the punches tonight, Lena. Look at me. False redemption seeks to restore dysfunction. Secondly, true redemption moves towards progress. False redemption maintains the status quo or tries to take us back. True redemption acknowledges history. False redemption repeats history. True redemption atones for mistakes. False redemption evades accountability. True redemption reforms harmful systems. False redemption revives harmful systems. So we see the two, while similar in name, are very not similar in function. And I looked at this and I was like, you know what that looks like? Reimagining versus remaking. You're gonna wanna remake when you're seeking to restore the dysfunction that was here before. You're remaking because you wanna go back in time. You wanna repeat history. And the reviving of harmful systems. And don't let my use of reform fool you. As I already talked about, reimagining can often involve tearing something completely down and building something new in its place. Well, I also want to talk about where hopeful redemption comes from. And I think that we seek this reimagination and redemption because we ourselves have been reimagined and redeemed in Christ Jesus. So this is the hopeful part I was talking about. We've been talking about reimagination, but we've got this hope. 1 Corinthians 5:14-17, I'm going to read it. For Christ's love compels us because we are convinced that one died for all and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but him who died for them and was raised again. So from now on, we regard no one from a worldly point of view. Though we once regarded Christ in this way, we do so no longer. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone, and the new is here. When I was studying this passage, scholars were saying that this whole idea of the newness is that we've not just been given another chance as the same being, but we have been given a whole new framework for thinking and living. We ourselves have been reimagined. And so Scripture shows us that God himself is in the business of reimagination. Reimagine is what our souls crave when we come to Jesus in the first place. We don't actually want to be remakes of who we once were. Think about it. You go to God and you're like, well, gospel music fans in the room. Any gospel music fans in the room? All right, so there's this song by B. Slade, formerly known as Tone. Make me over, Lord, make me over again. Think about that song. In his desperation, he's going to God and he's saying, Lord, remake me. Wash all my sins away, but leave me as the same person so I can bring all that back to life, bring all that dysfunction back to life, bring all that harm back to life. That doesn't make sense. When we're asking God to make us over, it's yes, remake us, but reimagine us, not so I can be remade into who I was, but so I can be reimagined into who you want me to be. That's a whole shift in the inside of us, right? A whole new way of living and thinking and working. So we now know that it is in God's nature and the way he moves through us to reimagine. God the creator, God the imaginer, that's not a word, and God who is in the business of reimagination. And that encourages me because I think through that and I'm like, okay, so if I'm dreaming up new things and I'm wanting to replace harmful systems and I'm wanting to do better, God is on my side. God supports that. God himself did that in me. So if I'm out here working to do that in the trenches, I know I'm not alone. And when the opponents of justice are like, no, let's do it as it was, I'm like, no, God didn't do it as it was. He's remaking me. And one day he's going to remake this whole thing, but that's something totally different that I'm not trying to talk about yet because I'll get going. There's another song that I heard recently. We have this thing in Nashville called the Choir Room where we all just come together and sing gospel songs. It's like hundreds of us. And we just sing. There's no other agenda. And so there's this one song that the bridge, it said, shout Jesus from the mountains, Jesus in the streets, Jesus in the darkness over every enemy. Jesus for my family, I speak the holy name of Jesus. And that song has been on repeat for me because I'm like, we're not just shouting Jesus in the streets because it sounds good. We're hoping that he's coming into where we are to reimagine the streets, to reimagine our families, to reimagine our social situations and our social standards because he sees it. And reimagination is in his nature. And that just really encouraged me. So I hope that if anyone's discouraged in here or feeling hopeless, I hope that reminder of Jesus being in the business of reimagination reminds you that you are on the right side because it encouraged me. So I said this earlier, but you'll know if it's reimagination or a remake by the end game, right? By what it yields as fruit. People love to claim that all sorts of things are going on, and I'd be like, where's the fruit to back that up? They'll call something the Great Awakening. I'd be like, wow, that is huge. You're still enslaving black people, though. You're still racist. They'll claim that they're having revival. I love revival. Revival is great. But there's still all kinds of racism and misogyny going on in the building. And I'm like, these words, the word revival doesn't just mean to come back to life. The definition also means that there's some kind of improvement in the condition or the strength of something. So I would say That yes, we're praising and we're worshiping, but are we also improving the conditions of our cities? Are we voting? Are we volunteering? Are we ending the cycles of harm within our own congregations and our own four walls? What are we calling revival? Are we actually remaking when God is in the business of reimagining? Some of them won't even hide that they want to go back to how things used to be. I'm about to say it. They'll say, "Make America great." Moms of Liberty aren't new. In the book banning and the changing of school curriculum, the Daughters of the Confederacy did it first. This one's a little tight. I'm only going to say half of it. Proud Boys, January 6th rioters, that's not new either. I'll let you fill in the blank. I want y'all to reimagine with me what I might be saying in your mind. And the politicians, they're not new in taking away our voting rights or redistricting and redlining all up and down our cities. It's all been done before. So if you're looking at the work that we're doing as believers reimagined and adopting of Christ's worldview, and we look at the work of those who oppose justice, then we should check the fruit and know that if it's not promoting newness and human flourishing, is God in it? If it sends us back to a time of bondage, is God in it? If it seeks to strip us of our rights, is God in it? If it chooses to erase and destroy our histories and our heritage, is God in that? Is that hopeful reimagination? If it promotes racism and misogyny and hatred and bigotry, is God in it? It sounds like a remake to me. God's not seeking to bring us back into bondage. He's moving us forward into hope and flourishing. Okay, I'm gonna simmer down a little bit. And I'm gonna talk about how to integrate hopeful reimagination into our daily lives. I think that's a big, big point for me especially, because we're all doing this justice thing together, but in our daily lives, we can easily get overtaken with discouragement. So I don't have the definition anymore, but hopeful reimagination involves using memory to help us dream up alternative solutions to current realities in pursuit of collective flourishing. So I would say let's focus on the present. The part that says dreaming up alternative solutions to current realities, we can't do that unless we're protecting our minds. We have to put a cap on how much of our present reality that we are internalizing and ruminating on. You don't have to read every headline. You don't have to get every breaking news notification. Some of y'all got to disable that notification tonight. You don't need it. You know what's going on. You know that we live in a fallen and broken world and it's going to get worse and worse. We know. And I think that a big part of protecting our mind involves protecting that desire in us to overconsume because it's drowning some things out in our present reality. It's choking out our joy. It's stoking our pessimism. It's stealing our time. We're doom scrolling. We're just like, well, that's bad. That's bad too. I might as well sit here. It's been an hour. What could we have done with that hour of our time? Consuming violent content. You don't have to watch that person be lynched. You don't have to consume that violent content. Do you know what that's doing to your mind? You know what that video is. You know what's going on. That's why you're needed. And the work that you're doing, that's why it matters. For some of us, social media outrage is tricking us into thinking that we're actually doing something fruitful for justice. This is coming from somebody who's got 500,000 followers across social media platforms. I'm over here like, is posting this proving anything or doing anything? Or I'm just trying to jump in on the outrage train and stoke emotions in people to get them to react. I'm being real. The time, also I want to add this too, the time of trying to convince other people that justice matters must be far outweighed by the time we're actually spending doing justice. I'm gonna keep it a buck. I've never said this on a stage before. On Instagram 2020. So there was 1 week where 300,000 people started following me in 1 week. I had been drawing illustrations about justice and hope and empathy and all those things. I had an example, but that doesn't matter. You can find it later at Oh Happy Danny if you care. But in 2020, over 300,000 people came to my Instagram page, and I saw unbelievably massive growth that I didn't want to do with and kind of sometimes wish didn't happen in that way. It's just been extremely difficult. There's just abuse and all those things, everything you can imagine. I just now reactivated the contact form on my page, on my website, in the year 2023, because abuse was just flooding in. And so I bring this up because between 2020 and now, I have lost over 50,000 followers on Instagram. I have been posting the same thing I've always posted. I listened to an episode of Code Switch, NPR's podcast. They had an episode that was called The Racial Reckoning That Never Was. I was like, huh? I pressed play. They were like, yeah, it actually says studies show that people care less now than they did before 2020. That insulted me. I found that to be rude. But it also explained what was going on with the platforms, and also explained to me that the time that I'm spending trying to teach Racism 101 to people who already know Racism 101, I found was time that I was taking away from what I'm going to talk about in a second, what we could actually be doing with that time. So I would definitely suggest to anyone doing this work, be online, post, share. Do not read every hate comment and every hate tweet. I would also suggest maybe even some social media office hours for yourself. I've seen somebody publicize this before. Like, I am online Thursdays and Fridays between 3 and 5 p.m. I've seen somebody do that in their bio. We have got to reel it in. It is robbing us of our time. Okay, I'm off that. Now let's talk about the future. I talked about present, protecting your mind. Future. We have to do less so that we can dream more. There is a space, a dream space. This is going to sound a little woo-woo, but trust me, I love the Lord, and I'm right here with y'all. There is a space of dreaming and imagination that we cannot unlock if we're doing this. If we're fighting with people and arguing with the same person at the same dinner table. I got this Toni Morrison quote. I'm going to read every line. The function, the very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being. Somebody says you have no language and you spend 20 years proving that you do. Somebody says your head isn't shaped properly, so you have scientists working on the fact that it is. Somebody says you have no art, so you dredge that up. Somebody says you have no kingdoms, so you dredge that up. None of this is necessary. There will always be one more thing. Distraction doesn't just rob us in the present, it robs us of our futures too. We have no time to dream because we're trying to prove all these things to everyone. I think that it's really important for us to create blank space. In graphic design, there's a term called white space. I don't know if there's any designers in the room. Okay. Yes, white space. It's meaning you intentionally leave margin around the most important elements of a design to let it breathe. If you don't leave white space or blank space, you are sacrificing the integrity of the work because it's so busy. We can't really get to the point because we're so just distracted by everything else. And I think that, and this might be hard because a lot of people don't like to talk about the privilege that comes with being able to create so much margin and space in your schedule, so I'm going to name that. But we have got to create space to dream. Think of those moments where we feel like our mind is opening up, like while we're washing the dishes, while we're in the shower, maybe a long drive. Did anybody relate to that at all? Your brain has a second, and you're like, oh, that's a great idea. I've been wondering what I could do with that. This is your dreaming, your dream space opening up. These are also some of the moments where we feel like the Lord is trying to speak to us. But those aren't the only moments when he's trying to speak to us. Those are the moments where we're undistracted enough to notice. And so I think it's so, so important. Man, I wish somebody would have told me this 2 years ago. Create white blank space. Do nothing hours. Carve out time to spend with those who light you up, light a fire inside of you. You talk to them and all of a sudden 4 hours have passed and you have a whole new business plan, social media outline. You're going to activate this tomorrow. You're going to have a team meeting next week. Don't you love that energy? You deserve it. What you're building needs it. Go outside. Maybe I'm just speaking to myself, but I be inside thinking that everything is over, and I step outside and I'm like, oh, everything's gonna be okay. Reading for fun, not just for learning or self-help. Y'all are okay. Jesus is sanctifying you. He's doing a work. You don't always have to view yourself as a self-improvement project. You can take time and set it aside and do things you love for the love of it. That's why we need each other. If we thought that this thing was dependent on us, we just think, oh man, I'm just messed up in all these different ways and I've got to learn all these things and unlearn all these things. And you're spending every waking moment just doing. There's no dreaming. There's no planning. There's no building. And if there is, there could be more. Find out what lights you up inside and follow that. Okay, I'm landing the plane. Here's number 3. The first one was protect your mind. Thank you, because I did not remember. This one was do less to dream more. And the final, stay faithful to the source material. I think it's interesting because we talked earlier about remakes and how they stay a little too faithful to the source material at times. But I believe that the beautiful thing about reimagination is that as long as there are injustice and evil and despair, there will also be a need for reimagination. There will always be a need for a remnant to rise up and dream up a better future. And so we can do that by sticking to the source material of the Word of God, but also the source material of our ancestors, the people who have trudged this and done this thing. Our pastor the other day gave us a list of Black women to read, like Sojourner Truth. I was like, tell me more. Harriet Tubman, Phyllis Wheatley. Did he say Phyllis Wheatley? All these Black women's names, and I'm like, duh, they've done this stuff. They did it better. Some people say, this is a common phrase, me and Dr. Christine have talked about this before, but this ain't your grandma's civil rights movement. What? To me, I get it. We are really like doing the thing and we are proud and everything, but I would never want to lose sight of my grandma's civil rights movement. Do you know how much we can pick up and learn from that? Do you know how much hope those poems and those books can fill us with? Harriet Tubman ran for freedom in the night, came back and freed other slaves. Listen, all right. So there's one of my last points I want to bring up. Yes, I said that. I want to talk about optimism versus pessimism. I am a very naturally joyful person. I have a happy disposition, so a lot of people just kind of assume that I'm just always optimistic. No, I think partially I'm just kind of built like this to no credit of my own. But also, I believe that I've worked to land at a certain spot on this scale. We've got optimism, we've got realism, we've got pessimism. I feel like I'm trying to land here. Conscious optimism. A lot of people use the phrase cautious optimism, and I get it, and it makes complete sense. For me, I felt like I wasn't, just by my nature, wasn't cautious in my pursuit of optimism. I wasn't tiptoeing toward it. I feel like I was actually learning more and more about the real state of things. This is 2021. After 2020 has worn off, I'm like, oh man, we're changing the world. And then it's 2021 and things are weird. So the realism is starting to kick in, and I'm like, okay, conscious optimism to me. I'm hopeful for the progress and the growth that's to come, but I'm still mindful of the work that needs to be done. So I'm not just stuck in the realism of this is how it is, and that's just how it is. That's important, and I'm glad I have people in my life who could bring me back down there a little bit, because I was thinking we were going to save the whole world. I don't know what was going on. But that optimism, I didn't want to lose sight of that either. And I think somebody once DM'd me, because I had optimist in my profile on Instagram, and they were like, I think the words you're looking for is hope. Because optimism, we can force it as much as we want, but I think conscious optimism taps into the hope of it. It's like, I see where we are, but I'm hopeful for change. I'm hopeful for growth. I'm hopeful for the light at the end of the tunnel, even if I don't always see it. So this right here, I include it because it reminds me of the life of Dr. King, who started out very, very optimistic from what I read, but he seemed to land in that kind of space. To me, I don't feel like he ever became a pessimist, but I do believe that he factored in a lot more realism while still clinging to that hope that he has in Jesus and hope for a change in the future. And I mention this because I started to think about this year, actually, because every year on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, opponents of justice do a very strange thing. They quote him. I'd be like, Dr. King? Y'all know what they say. I have a dream that my 4 little babies will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of the skin, but by the content of their, I have that dream too. Yes, he said that, and he dreamed. And they look at what he said, and they look at what we do, and then they say, Dr. King would be ashamed. What are y'all doing? What's wild is Dr. King was not only in the business of reimagination, this same speech was kind of a masterclass in reimagination, and they killed him because he decided that he would not stop until all things were made new, until he felt that this reimagination was occurring in our country. He wouldn't have stopped. Because he said so in the line before that. He said, I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state of sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. And in a line after that, I have a dream, you can't see that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain. That's reimagination. And the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. A masterclass. And I'm ending with this quote because, I don't really know what I can say after this, but this is our hope, is what he went on to say. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. Is anybody leaving and going back to the South? With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we'll be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. And I think that this is our hope too. We're working for all this to be realized in the here and now, but we have this living hope that one day, if we don't get it right on here on earth, God is coming and he's reimagining this whole thing, and there will be a new heaven and a new earth. And I believe that what was wrong will be made right, and everything sad will become untrue. Does anybody believe that? That's my hope. That's my hope. Thank you so much.